I would just start off with an axiom on a fridge magnet that I saw the other day on 6th Avenue, and I've tweaked it such that it now is a grantee or a grant winner is just a loser who applied again. And that is to say that just about everyone who has won a grant in one fashion or another has been declined from others. And it seems banal and a real truism, but everything starts with applying, really. And just to build on what Kathy started with, I have, there are as many bits of advice about grant writing as there are applicants. And so I've chosen my sort of top 10 in just an arbitrary list that I'll share with you that will hopefully be of some help. But you'll probably see by the end of the panel, they'll likely overlap with some others' counsel. Number one, and this builds upon what Kathy started out with, are resources. In the age of Google and in the age of meta searches, there's really no excuse for not knowing what's out there. And that extends beyond the GSAS's both internal and external listings, but nearly every humanities department in the country has its own internal and meta list of fellowships. And by sitting down for an afternoon or a couple of afternoons, essentially just make yourself a list of every single thing that you're eligible to apply for. You will inevitably find things that you were unaware of. And of course, it takes some time to compile them and to list them and to collate them and sort them. But knowing what is available is the first and perhaps obvious step. Number two is to really help yourself out with a list of deadlines. I, in the past, have simply just listed the deadline dates, also copied them into my calendar, and you have a kind of ticking clock for what's due when and which chunks. And of course, as you're applying, particularly for you grad students applying for postdocs, as much as it is a kind of part-time job, as you all know, it requires an immense amount of time and energy. The upside is that you can cut and paste. There is a certain degree of overlapping, such that even though things are due near each other, sometimes that can work in your favor because you can use half of one application for another fellowship. Number three is drafts, and more drafts. The fellowship application, particularly those in the humanities, are as much a writing sample as they are a cross-section of content. So you should think of your fellowship application as a kind of abstract of your project. So the committee is getting not only the layout of what you want to do, but the language in which you will couch those findings, right? Such that it's a kind of microcosm of your work as a scholar, in a sense. So the more it can be refined, the better, and that can't be stressed enough. Number four is keeping in mind your audience, and this has something to do with what these scholars, Adam Przeworski and Frank Solomon, have called the disciplinary superego of an application, right? So I, as an art historian applying to a humanities grant, need to convince my readers of the extra or aesthetic worth of the questions at stake. So you need to demonstrate to your reader the significance of its objects as vectors of more far-reaching ideas that also intersect with other fields. So overcoming the disciplinary superego of your project. That leads in a sense to number five, which is tunneling between the specificity of your project and its parameters and that more ineffable thing that we call the field. So a really good project will take you from the real nuts and bolts, the brass tacks of precisely what you are doing in oftentimes very refined detail and description as well, to the bigger picture, to why it matters. I think the most successful grant applications have both of those elements, right? Just like the best movies make you laugh and cry, and have a sort of larger picture and oftentimes the most kind of seemingly banal of details, it will sort of tunnel between those two poles. Number, I don't know what number I'm on anymore, but 6. So, and that's right. Number 6, the is again to stress the importance of detail, of hard and fast examples and objects. I was recently reading one of my own graduate students' grant applications, and the second that the description started to convince me was the point at which it actually named some of the particular objects bound up with the research and the study, and how those one subsection of one chapter was a kind of metonymy for the larger project, that it supported it, it ramified it at the local detailed level. So those details can oftentimes be as compelling as this broad picture. Number 7, and this is particularly the case, I think, for those applying for postdocs, is having your work break out of that oftentimes sort of solipsistic shell of the dissertation, opening it up to wider problems, themes, and histories. And yet also for those writing for dissertation fellowships, how do you at the same time convince the committee that your dissertation is feasible, is doable in its own right? What are its aims? What are its chapters? How will its method sort of exfoliate existing scholarship? And part of that, I think, is having a real kind of hard and fast breakdown of what, when, and how you will tackle those various problems. And the next is, and this is a somewhat more risky gambit, but of course any project has certain risks that it takes, right? Sometimes the application that takes more risks might stand out, and it might stand out in a good way or not necessarily. But one example that has long stood out for me was I was once on a committee at USC for a seminar much like this, and we read a sample of all of the graduate students' work, and one of the grant proposals that stuck with me was one that opened with a description. It opened with a description of an artwork that was sitting in a musty archival box at the Getty Center in Los Angeles. And it started with that object, and it opened up onto a larger social, cultural, epistemological field. And the student talked about how this ignored, forgotten piece sitting in this archival box stood for the project's larger aims and its recuperation of a kind of lost history. And that object came to seem almost like a kind of ticking bomb that the student was rescuing from history. And that is to say that sometimes if your application has a kind of trope, it can really help you in organizing and compelling your readers. Now,
just don't call it a trope.
Well, I mean, there's some humanistic writings that would take the use of certain tropes actually quite seriously, right? I mean, but that you're right to the extent to which you want to be flashy about your methodology is also can be a liability, right? So I would say that sometimes the most standout grants are those that have a kind of charisma to them in terms of the way they're looking at things. But yes, you also don't want to seem sort of too over the top, I suppose. So I think my last number is sort of just a few more minute things, but that really help is sort of lumped together. And you'd be surprised how many applications do this, including my own, that I always have to check myself, is avoid passive verb constructions. So my project argues that. In this dissertation, I contend that. The use of active verbs in the present really already gives a sense that there's a momentum to the project that's already happening, rather than some future tense that perhaps will be off in the future. have a non-academic friend read it, and if you use the word trope too much, they're going to tell you, right? Sometimes having that non-academic eye helps you really think about, well, wait a minute, what are the standout breakdown, the nuts and bolts of this project, as might be read of someone, say, even outside of your field. That also helps. And then lastly, I would say acknowledge the work of other scholars and don't dismiss that work as irrelevant. You want to seem at once confident but also humble, right? So discuss existing scholarship as actually foundational to your own to the extent that it is. But at the same time, set out the boundaries of your own project and tell us where it will take the field at large, not simply your project, right? Because the most successful work is that which will actually obviously expand beyond the parameters of your one particular project or dissertation.